You know, Dan,
I do.
the calendar is just about to hit July. We're about a week and a half, 10 days-ish away from July. And that's when I consider the college football preseason to be underway.
July is the preseason kicks off. Okay.
The cutoff for me is the end of June, the start of July. That's when the preseason hits. And we thought with the preseason being so close now, we can almost taste it.
Yeah.
We needed to make sure we worked this episode into our arsenal.
Agree.
This is our college football fan therapy episode. We last did this back in February of last year, 2023. That episode was way more generalized, right? So we talked about our favorite things in college football, like a big 4th and goal touchdown.
Yes, of course.
What have you. Our least favorite things, the high points, the low points as fans. For this episode, though, we asked people for their moments from last season that were most traumatizing to them as fans of their teams.
Yeah.
And we were inundated with responses.
Yeah.
Anytime you appeal to emotion like that.
Yeah.
We are inundated with responses. So we got all sorts of responses from Twitter, from Patreon, from all corners, email, all corners of the internet. And today we're going to talk through those traumatic moments, see if we can work some stuff out.
Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below.
And then plod forward into the preseason, if that's okay with you.
Right. Well, it's the same thing as like you go through a bad breakup and you can't really start up a serious relationship in earnest again until you sort of work through what you're going through. And whether that's sitting with a licensed professional, whether that's really sitting and meditating on your thoughts, like you have to make peace with certain elements of your life before you move on. And as we move on to the 2024 season, I think it's important, and you and I are going to join the crowd here, you got to work through what's sort of lingering in your mental mud, right? And is that a term? I don't even know.
No, you got to do some work on yourself.
You got to do some work on yourself. You have to make peace. You have to push things into the past and acknowledge that they happened. Forgive yourself, forgive whoever you need to forgive, and move forward. And so we really can't get into 2024 without making that peace. And so I really do appreciate everybody who weighed in on things that are still a little bit traumatizing. And so what we're going to do is review those very specific traumas, talk about what it's like to go through those specific kinds of moments, whether you're a fan of that team or not, and then maybe work through why either they were isolated or it's not something to worry about anymore, or why there's hope that it won't happen again for very specific reasons. That it's not that we're going to sunshine pump, but we're also going to acknowledge that pain and validate that pain. Thank you, Ty. And say, you know what? There's a good chance you won't feel that again this year, or maybe not in the same way. Or there's a good chance that something might happen this year that'll make you forget, in a good way, forget those bad memories from last year. And so college football it's a community sport. We're here as a community. Ty and I are members of this emotional community. So let's all bathe in the digital, peaceful jacuzzi together.
It's still real to me, damn it.
Got a little bit of a sound, as we often do. You know, we are split into tribes all too often in this college football universe. Hopefully this episode is one of those deals where we can all unite under a common banner. Yeah. Healing, talking it out, doing that work on ourselves, moving forward into the preseason. We'll do it again next year because Lord knows this sport is never short on trauma, things that really get respective fan bases going. We were, as I said earlier, completely inundated by responses that came in. And we're going to do our best to get through some of our favorites. We cannot get to all of these. We would be here all day. So for as fun as it will be, as good as it will be, as healing, hopefully, as it will be to go through and talk through these moments, it would probably be overkill to go through all of them because it would be about a 5-hour show.
Yeah. So we're here to be what? We're here to be therapists.
We are. We're trying. We're doing our best.
We're going to be... I'm trying to think of a quick rhyme pun here, Ty. We're here to be Andre Warapists. I could do better. I could do better. I know I can.
Think about it. Go back to the lab.
Thank you.
Hit follow. Hit subscribe if you're just following along for the very first time here on the Solid Verbal, you could also find us out across various social media platforms. We're all over. We're pushing hard in the off season. We're getting ready for the year ahead. And last but certainly not least, going out to verballers.com. VERBALLERS.com. That's our Patreon, where you get these episodes ad-free a little bit early. We also do bonus content. We've got a Discord server. Just made an Olympics channel for the Discord server. Speaking of gearing up for July, a lot going on in our community as ever. Where do you want to start?
You pick, Ty. You put together this beautiful beautiful Google Doc of emotions.
What was the most traumatic thing for you as an Oregon fan last year?
Definitely the manner in which Oregon lost both of those games, but especially the first game to Washington, because I think even if they had beaten Washington that first time, they still would have ended up in the Pac-12 championship game against Washington. But the opportunities Oregon had via turnovers, via successful drives to take points near the end of that first half. And in the moment, I'll admit that I got caught up, and I loved the all gas, no brakes mentality of going for it on fourth downs and stuff. But when you see the way that game played out, and that points were going to be very much needed, that it was going to be a close game, like, then it started hitting me that, like, oh man, there were moments back there that hurt, and that you knew Michael Penix was going to be able to drive that team. If Michael Penix had the opportunity, there was a great chance that he and that offense and those receivers were going to be successful. Ultimately, there was a moment late where Oregon, a safety overran a play and could have had an interception that would have ended the game. Very good safety for Oregon, Evan Williams. All games come down to moments that are close, but for a long time, I feel like I've worked through it just because it was still a successful season for Oregon, and it could have been more. But Oregon had a chance to flip everything by beating Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. We're not able to do that. Slow start there. So the way I'm working through it right now is I feel good about where the Oregon roster is. I feel good about the Oregon-Washington rivalry, at least in the short term, with where Washington's roster is at, because I feel as if Washington may have had a lightning in a bottle type season last year with Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix.
Sure.
I think Washington is going to rebuild that roster to a pretty interesting place under Jed Fish, but I'm not as worried in this moment. So that's where I am at in terms of making peace with all of that.
I think the popular answer among Notre Dame fans would be to say the Ohio State game. I am obviously included in that, whether it's 10 men on the field or a dropped interception or just in general the offense feeling the rest of the way after the Ohio State game,
right?
Like it didn't necessarily have a North Star. Thankfully, Jared Parker now elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I would kind of lump together that 3-week stretch of games between the end of September the 23rd, and the start of October the 7th.
So
because
what is that, Ohio State, Duke, Louisville?
Ohio State, and then 2 road games, Duke and Louisville.
Yeah.
You'll recall the Ohio State game, Notre Dame maybe could have won that game. I'm still working through that one myself.
What is more difficult, the dropped pick or the 10 men on the field near the end?
I think the drop pick, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Literally in the grasp. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't drop the pick, the game's over. You win. The Duke game brought its own trauma because obviously Sam Hartman, not known for being fleet of foot, needed to be fleet of foot.
Yeah.
And that's how they ended up winning that game. And then the Louisville game was just kind of a tire fire. That game was a disaster. Maybe a look-ahead spot with USC on deck, who knows? But that 3-week stretch for sure was traumatic for me as a Notre Dame fan, and I never fully recovered. We got a bunch of responses that are similar to that.
Right.
Some talking about the interception, the near interception, others talking about 10 men on the field. That was a very, very common theme among Notre Dame fans.
The interesting thing with both of the examples we used is the team that roots for the winning team. Obviously, people are happy that their team won. I'm positive that game was not a fun experience for Ohio State fans.
No,
right?
Not at all.
I'm positive the game was not a fun experience for Washington fans until Washington won. And even Ohio State fans, in the way that they won that game with the last second goal line score, like they were sitting on their hands, their hearts were bursting through their chests. And, that's the sport, right? That's the excitement of the sport, that it comes down to these huge moments. And if your team can capitalize, it's great. But that had to have been more of a relief than anything for Ohio State fans rather than a moment of jubilation. And same goes for like a Duke fan who thought that they could close out that game against Notre Dame, and that Notre Dame could not have won that game without Sam Hartman's legs, that they needed that. And so that's gutting. And I actually imagine the Louisville game was quite fun for Louisville fans. Who was it? Who was the back that ran through Notre Dame?
Oh, Jawar Jordan.
Yeah,
Jawar Jordan. Who I had warned everybody about going into that game. And I think we did a bonus episode talking about his ability to break off big runs and how he fit into that offense and what Braum was doing in year one. There were a lot of things that we talked about as part of that bonus
Do you
episode.
feel like you've made peace with the crazy end of the Duke game, that perhaps Notre Dame's in a better place now that they've taken Duke's quarterback?
Yeah, now that they've taken Duke's quarterback.
And
I think,
and that
let me
they've
put it this way.
solved Louisville issues.
I don't know if they've solved any issues,
Okay.
but let me put it to you this way. It was very easy and convenient to blame it on the offensive coordinator and Jared Parker and the obvious disconnect between the scheme he was running and the way that the offensive line was blocking.
Right.
It never seemed like those two units or those two sides of offense were on the same page. There was just an obvious bit of disconnect there.
Right.
And so knowing that Parker's gone now, head coach of Troy, somehow, some way, they've obviously done some renovations around the offensive side of things at Notre Dame. I think that turning of the page has given me a lot of hope.
Good.
And so I think I'm past that.
Are you, as Michael Scott likes to say, are you ready to be hurt again?
I am ready to be hurt again. I'm ready to be hurt again. You know it. That's
no
the way
doubt about it. I'm ready to be hurt.
Here.
That's the entirety of the college football experience.
That's the entire experience.
Taking the spring and summer to work through issues and either telling yourself or not telling yourself that you're ready to be hurt again. That's all it is. Unless you're a Georgia fan, and even Georgia didn't make the playoff this year. They most certainly would have in a 12-teamer. But that is, if you're going to distill college football fandom to one moment on The Office or any TV show, there's no doubt about it. I'm ready to be hurt again.
Ready to be hurt again. All right. Speaking of which.
It's still real to me,
Yeah.
damn it.
All right. So let's go to our good friend Jeremy on Patreon, who more so than anybody else that wrote in, passed the assignment here. I am not kidding when I say this. It's very easy to exaggerate in this forum. I get it. True story. I spit my tea out this morning when I read this.
Ooh.
He says Utah and Cam Rising saying he was maybe available for the first 6 weeks of the season and towing fans along after ACL surgery.
Yeah.
Especially frustrating was when he dressed for the UCLA game but changed at halftime, which I totally forgot about until he brought that up.
Right.
The changing at halftime was just a dagger. And then he says the best/worst thing was Kyle Whittingham saying it all came down to, quote, uno doctor, end quote.
Yeah.
That whole Cam Rising scenario, by the way, we're not fully out of the woods with that one yet.
No, I got to see him on the field. Yeah.
Cam Rising's back this year, could come back next season.
Yeah.
We still I guess we assume he's healthy now. He's had plenty of time to recover. Hopefully for his case, for Utah's case, he will be. But again, this cloud of uncertainty, I think, does shroud the whole Utah campaign now as we go into 2024. So there's almost nothing more frustrating than the whole will he, won't he injury side of things. And we got some comments on Twitter with respect to this as well. Let me see if I can pull up the name. Telemachus says the whole will he, won't he scenario surrounding Cam Rising coming back from injury. Will he make it back in time for the games?
Right.
Won't he? Will he be ready by the bye week, after the bye week, in time for USC? Why don't we have better quarterback depth, dragging it out the whole damn season? I also asked people, by the way, just as like a fun little sidebar, give me your go-to fast food order. Just, I don't know why I did that. And he says steak chalupas with a hot sauce side from Taco Bell. So
I want to do, and we are going to figure out a way to do an off-topic fast food deep dive show for our Patreon.
You sent a message today, which I think
to a potential expert. Yeah, I'm very excited. Hopefully,
let's go into Cam Rising.
Okay, let's go into Cam Rising. I get a lot of friend zone vibes from that situation. Like Utah fans, they were craving Cam Rising in their life in a meaningful way, and Cam Rising went in for the hug when approached with a couple of lips, right? We've all seen that. We've all been there. We've all experienced that moment where you just want clarity. You just want closure, right? You just want somebody to come out and say, the doctor said it's not happening this fall, but that never happened. That never happened. And so it's just this constant friend zone, like, well, maybe if I get strong over the summer, she's going to think I'm going to. No. Okay. And so it was really never going to happen. Even if he were dressing for the game, or if he got weird advice, or if Kyle Whittingham got weird advice, whatever it is, that it clearly just was not going to happen. And it really, every week, talking yourself into the possibility that this is the week for Cam Rising. This is the moment she notices me in Algebra 2. Like, that's brutal. And so I don't see a way in which Cam Rising doesn't play this year. With the full off season of health and the reports that have come out of Salt Lake City and his age and his dedication to Utah football, that for better or worse, it's going to be a Cam Rising year. And for better or worse, I don't think Kyle Whittingham, if Cam Rising just isn't good to go or gets hurt, like I don't see a universe in which Utah fans are strung along once again. That it's too cruel for Utah football to do that 2 years in a row. And I know they didn't do that in a malicious way. No. And I know there was probably something competitive behind it, so that schools had to consider that Cam Rising might be starting. And maybe they were convinced that there was a possibility Cam Rising might start. But to be strung along for weeks upon weeks on end, brutal. That your potential all-conference caliber quarterback might finally be back after having suffering the knee injury in the Rose Bowl the year before, it's
brutal.
You got injury zoned.
You got injury zoned. It would have been much better if they just came out and said, guys, his knee went through a meat grinder.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think we found out retroactively was, Cam Rising was way more injured than anybody knew. He was way more injured. He tore up his whole knee.
Right.
Still, we had that false hope. The false hope that he might come back from it, that he might play, that he might have an impact on the Utah season. The good news is, if you wrote in about this, and we did have other people who wrote in too, there is a redemption arc here.
Yeah.
If he comes back this season, new conference, right? You know how high I am on Utah. We haven't done previews yet. We will next month. I think there's a very real possibility that Utah could have a very good season, but Cam Rising needs to be back.
And the good news is you now know how to protect your heart, right?
You know how to protect your heart.
You know how to protect your heart. You are able to be a little, withholding of full dedication of emotion to Cam Rising, to Utah football, whatever. And so you're now experienced and you have that scar tissue for sure. But I think the good news is, by and large, knock on wood, you have a catastrophic injury, and maybe you're not the same, but just the injury gods tend to smile down upon people a little bit differently once you've already gone through it. Hopefully.
Here is a different kind of trauma.
Please.
That I am glad there was only one person who brought this type of thing up. This is in a class all to itself. This was David from out on our Patreon.
Okay.
Witnessing Michigan run 33 consecutive times and absolutely bullying Penn State in Beaver Stadium while Drew Aller repeatedly threw to no one.
Right.
Shudder. He says his order is Big Mac and fries with a Diet Coke. He's a simple man.
Nice.
I want to talk through this style of trauma because we talk about it often. I think defeatism. You and I referenced it a little bit in passing when we talked about the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Super Bowl goes to overtime. Pat Mahomes gets the ball.
Yeah.
There was this sense of inevitability.
Yeah.
Where you just sort of knew what was coming.
A fog crept over the field. Yeah.
You just sort of knew. There was no mystery there. You were just waiting for it to happen. This, what David described, is a close cousin of that, where you've just seen the same thing over and over and over again, right? We're all talking now about college football 25. I remember college football 14 back in the day, NCAA 14. I've got the copy here right next to me.
Yeah.
I remember playing against people online, friends, whoever, and that feeling of helplessness when somebody was very good at running the ball. And they just kept doing it. You couldn't stop it. There's no way out. They wore down the clock. In this case, Michigan ran for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Obviously, Blake Corum, but Donovan Edwards got involved. Even J.J. McCarthy got involved. Almost more with his legs than through the air. He only threw the ball 8 times in that game.
Right.
That feeling is helpless. That feeling is so damn frustrating, knowing that there is no way to stop what is coming. Michigan, that was Michigan's brand. They did that to everybody. It wasn't just Penn State, but it felt like it was very exaggerated with Penn State because they did it, again, 33 straight times.
I don't know, as a Penn State fan, how do you not allow yourself to feel a little bit of hope in a game like that, though? Right?
That's the problem. Right. That's the problem, right? Because there is always this sense of, okay, it's 3rd and whatever. If we stop them here. Nope.
Well, it was what? 14-9. I have it up here. 14-9 at halftime, and it was a 1-score game going into the 4th quarter. It was an 8-point game, if my math is correct. 17-9 at the end of the 3rd quarter. So in my mind, I'm not saying to myself, they'll find a way to lose. Because once you're in it, once I'm in that game, I can say, sure, my team's stupid. But my team is just frisky enough on defense that they could bat a ball up in the air and some safety could return it the distance. Like that, there are too many ways for a team to accidentally win a big game, like Penn State has done against, Ohio State. They get was a field goal block all those years ago to win that game. That I still allow myself to hold out hope in 1-score games in the second half, even if Oregon's not looking good, whoever, that when you're in the moment, even if I'm feeling pessimistic, there's still a chunk of my college football heart that says weirder things have happened. Michigan's not even throwing the ball. So who knows what could have a special teams play, a defensive play, a weird miscue that in the moment, I could not allow myself to go full 100% defeatism. I can't.
We got a different class of trauma here as well.
By the way, what would you say to Penn State fans? Should they maintain this attitude if they feel this way? Or what hope would you say is healthy enough to take a shot of with Penn State football with regard to Michigan and Ohio State?
I don't think there's so much a problem with Penn State's defense.
Of course not.
James Franklin has proven pretty capable at putting a good defense out on the field year in and year out. Where I would say the hope is this season to get over that hump is bringing in a new offensive coordinator, is changing up the way that this team hopefully plays offense. Penn State in that game was 4 of 14 on 3rd downs. They converted a couple 4th downs, but by and large, it was a problem with their offense not being able to move the ball that put them in that position. If Penn State's offense had been a little bit more capable, Michigan might not have had the luxury of running it 33 straight times. So hopefully this year, still got your hotshot quarterback, still got your dynamic duo tandem in the backfield. Hopefully they can figure something out wide. But I think the promise of maybe a new style of offense could help mitigate some of that.
I would add, externally, Michigan is not going to be as good this year. And I don't believe Penn State doesn't play Michigan, right?
They do not.
So that's a great reason. Penn State cannot lose to Michigan during the regular season this year.
Fair point.
Do they play Ohio State?
They do play Ohio State.
Ohio State bringing back a quarterback?
No.
So new Ohio State quarterback?
Sort of.
Experience. They have backup quarterbacks that were there last year. But if Will Howard is indeed the starter officially, Will Howard has had some low moments as a starting quarterback at a major college football program.
He has. We got
a lot of pressure
about that.
A lot of pressure on Ohio State this year.
Yeah. Super Operator says Will Howard's performance versus Oklahoma State.
So, in terms of, you can internally say, Drew Aller get another full off season as the starter, new offensive coordinator who he might gel better with. The receivers might be in a better place. The defense is still going to be quite strong, which will keep Penn State or win Penn State games. I think there's good reason to assume an uptick in Penn State football this year. There's good reason to drink that hopium.
All right, so we've covered the confusing, frustrating impatience that comes along with,
of course,
waiting for somebody to heal from injury. We've covered the air of inevitability, 33 straight runs. Let's talk about the unforeseen, the unpredictable collapse. Brad writes in to say undefeated Louisville losing to Pitt. Keith says Louisville's absolute collapse in their last 3 games.
Yeah.
The last 2 to backup quarterbacks. And kind of in the same vein, we got other ones that I think fall into this category. Mason writes in about Oklahoma. Following the program's biggest win in 5+ years, and a bye week, mind you, they escaped at home against 3-3 UCF, lost to Kansas for the first time since 1997, then lost to Oklahoma State in the final Bedlam game, at least for now. And in those 2 losses, 6 turnovers and 19 penalties for 155 yards. Thank you for doing so much research for us, Mason. It saved us a little bit of work here. But this is another class on its own, right? This is, I think, something that the vast majority of college football fans have to deal with. And frankly, it's what separates, or what has separated, the Nick Saban-led Alabamas and the Georgias, to some extent the Ohio States, from the rest of college football, in that they don't really have those types of games. Everybody else does.
Yeah.
Everybody else has had that situation where it feels like, man, we're on top of the world, and then what the hell happened?
So, in the case of Louisville last year, I suspect many Louisville fans looked at their schedule, looked at how they were performing, looked at the health of their opponents at times, looked at the manner in which they were winning games. And look, the Duke game was impressive. I think Riley Leonard either was injured in that game or was beat up in that game, so they weren't at 100%. And good, beat them 23-0, I believe. You look at Louisville against Notre Dame, that's a no-doubter great performance from Louisville. And I would understand why people would be enthusiastic and hopeful for the rest of the season about Louisville. But like you see other moments in barely beating NC State, coming back to beat Georgia Tech, I think, to start the season. Like, it was a good Louisville team. But the difference between good and great, as every fan knows, is the little things, is pulling out, the clunker performances. And Louisville wasn't good enough last year to do that. I don't think anybody truly believed that Jack Plummer was the strongest quarterback in the world and had fully turned a corner from where he was at Purdue or Cal. He was a decent quarterback. And so this is the difference between teams. And again, I think Louisville fans know this, that, have been recruiting a roster and building a roster for years on end and doing their best in year one to build something competitive, which is what Louisville tried to do last year. But when you get to the end of the season and you're dealing with injuries and you're dealing with depth concerns and you're dealing with, a defense as strong as Florida State's or a wild card team like Kentucky in a rivalry game, or Louisville played USC in the bowl game.
Yep.
Another wild card situation. You don't know what to expect out of Miller Moss. That there were, strong elements to the Louisville defense, but also some pretty suspect ones. That it all happened at the same time. It's tough, man. I get it. That you feel like you're reading one of those stories that, the dam in Minnesota or whatever, it's standing now, but experts are saying it won't be there by 2031. And so, most teams, you have that feel as a fan. They're like, yeah, they won, but they're not going to be able to win many more if they play like this. And so the good news for Louisville is it's year 2. A lot of roster turnover, but the more a coach has his fingerprints on a program, the less they're going to lose in repeated ways, hopefully, right? That if you're a Penn State fan, you might be piping up and you're like, But the good news for Louisville is the ACC remains a wild card. They have another quarterback with at least a high ceiling, we'll see, in Tyler Shuck. And that Jeff Brom has found talent, has been able to win big games, and it should be easier to do at Louisville than he was able to do at Purdue. And that the ACC is sort of a moving target right now in terms of who's actually going to be in the conference long term. Louisville's pretty well positioned as a major program. Also, their basketball team might be good again soon. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, and on Mason's comment about Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It is such a story of highs and lows.
Yes.
When you've got a team of Oklahoma's caliber, right? Like Brent Venables comes in, succeeds pretty much right away. I would say it obviously was a bit of an open question as to, all right, what's the defense going to look like now with
I'm gonna roll tape of the 2022 TCU game if you're saying succeeded right away. Continue.
Well, what I mean by that is Lincoln Riley was very successful there.
Yeah.
To bring in a new coach, even one who's got a lot of familiarity with it, you don't know what you're going to get. It is a bit of a coin flip. And I think by and large, the talent acquisition model has still been pretty strong. I get that Oklahoma maybe isn't winning as many titles or as many big games as they want to start. But I think by and large, now as we enter year 3 with Venables, we can feel pretty confident that he's going to be okay. This program is not on the verge of bottoming out or anything. The issue that I think Mason and other Oklahoma fans are going to have this year is with moving to the new conference in the SEC.
Yeah.
The schedule is brutal. The schedule's brutal. There are exciting players on that. I'm like pumped to see Jackson Arnold in the full season. Maybe more so than any other new quarterback this year. We've heard so much about him. We saw him in limited time last year. I really want to see what he can do full SEC season. But that schedule really gives you nowhere to hide. And so if anything is going to distract you from some of the disappointment and the trauma from a year ago, I think just kind of put it in the back of your mind that we've got a really tough schedule in front of us this year. And keep your expectations somewhat realistic. And if you are able to exceed those expectations, you'll feel like you won the national championship.
Well, here's the other good news. If you're an Oklahoma fan, one, the defense got way better last year and will continue to get better because of recruiting, because of, year 3 in a system. And Oklahoma is going to win more games because of defense than any of us can remember from the modern era.
Yes.
That's a great starting point, given how they've recruited, given the star power returning. I think of Peyton Bowen at safety all over the place. The other good news is the ceiling of Jackson Arnold, if we're talking about quarterback and defense being the playoff combo, Jackson Arnold at his best.
That's what I'm saying.
Looks like, I know you're saying it. The other great thing about this move to the SEC, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm not saying Oklahoma overlooked anybody. They certainly don't overlook Oklahoma State in a bedlam game as they lost last year close. But you play Kansas, you play UCF in their first year as a major conference team, and maybe there's an assumption. I'm just guessing here, just full guess. An assumption behind the scenes that of course we're going to win this game. And of course we're going to win this game comfortably. And the way in which they lost to Kansas in the rain, Jeff Lebby's gone, by the way. Criticism of Jeff Lebby as an offensive mind among a lot of Oklahoma fans. So if that was what you saw perceived to be a solution to Oklahoma's problems, he's gone. And while the offensive line is a question, there's still something about when you are amongst people who are great at what they do, and if you believe that to be the case with SEC teams, that the SEC will have Oklahoma's full attention in a new way. So if I stuck you on the court with a bunch of basketball players who are clearly better than you wouldn't be going through the motions. You'd be so locked in to be like, yep, I got to set more screens. Yep, I got to box out. Yeah. Yep, I got to pick my spots in a smart way. That's just when you're paired with high level whatever, you lock in a little bit better.
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron. And so I just don't think Oklahoma is going to see itself as oh yeah, of course we're going to beat UCF comfortably. Of course we're going to beat Tennessee or Alabama or whoever comfortably, because they're not going to think that. There's going to be extra attention, I feel like, with these new teams entering new conferences that are perceived to be better or deeper or whatever. And so I think Oklahoma is going to be more locked in this year than ever before.
Well, they better be, because the final 5 games of the season are at Ole Miss, at Mizzou, they're home against Bama, they're at LSU. There's a game in there against the vaunted Black Bears of Maine and their terrifying bear mascot. But not a whole lot of breaks in there. You couldn't look past any of those teams even if you wanted. So we'll see. All right. New class of trauma, Dan.
Okay.
This is the gambling trauma.
Yeah.
You ever lose a bad bet? You're not much of a betting man.
No.
But surely you've made a bet at some point in your life and you lost via a bad break or two. Yeah,
of course.
You've been there.
Yeah. You lose because of a botched extra point snap or something just totally random. Yeah, the bad beats are the worst.
I made a bet yesterday or 2 days ago on the French Euro soccer game. Lost. Bad break. France felt like they beat them 5-0. Couldn't score. Couldn't convert.
Who'd they play?
Won the game. I forget who they played. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It felt like they killed them. Score wasn't that big of a disparity, but Daniel writes in. He says, prior to the season, I put $20 on Bo Nix to win the Heisman at 16-1.
1-0 over Austria. Continue.
Austria is not a bad team, actually. Bill Connolly liked them on a bonus show that I did last
nice.
week. $20 bet at 16-1 on Bo to win the Heisman.
Great. Makes sense.
Then months later, I celebrated my birthday as a huge Oregon fan with an early dinner reservation so I could get home. Cue the music up.
Yeah, we're here with you. Yeah.
So I could get home to be able to watch the Pac-12 championship game. Here's a quick recap. My team lost the final conference championship game of the conference to a bitter rival as multiple score favorites, losing to said rival 3 times in a calendar year, lost our shot at a playoff, lost a chance to, in said playoff, play in what could have been the last, quote, real Rose Bowl, Big Ten winner against Pac-12 winner.
Yeah.
Bo lost a shot at the Heisman. No. I, quote unquote, lose $300 and had planned on celebrating my win by buying a Bo jersey, my first named player jersey, on my MFing birthday. So yeah, it was a traumatic evening for the Oregon Ducks and me. On to next season. He says, by the way, hot and spicy McChicken, small fry, and a McDouble. So we got that one on the betting front. We also got one from David, who says, does losing a bet in horrific manner count? Of course it does. Mm-hmm. If so, it's Oregon's 45-yard interception return with about 30 seconds left versus Texas Tech. For a 38-30 final, I had Texas Tech +5, or the LSU 17-yard interception return with about 30 seconds left against Mizzou. For the 49-39 final, I had Mizzou +5.5. I think I had Mizzou in that one too. We also got a text message from our friend Tim Murray, who also lamented the way that Oregon-Texas Tech game shook out.
That's a real bad beat, yeah.
That was a super
Mace
bad
Funa,
beat.
I think, was the Oregon pick 6 catcher runner.
Super bad beat.
Yeah.
When you've got one of those deals where it's like inside of one score, feels like you got it, and then suddenly air out of the balloon. That's a bad beat. I've been there, man. More times than I care to admit. So
Mace Funa was Washington State, excuse me. I think it was Jeff Bassa, linebacker. Oof, that's tough. I don't feel
brutal
that
stuff.
I enjoyed the pick 6 myself. Yeah.
Here's another one. We got a bunch of these from Zachary. Who else here? Let me see. From Caleb. The soul-crushing end-of-game loss. And this takes on a couple different forms. This is the Hail Mary loss.
Yeah.
West Virginia losing 41-39 at the gun to Houston. There's that. There is also the thing that happened to Miami with the we should have kneeled.
Mm-hmm.
Alex tweeted us a picture, a still frame of the end of the Miami-Georgia Tech game. He referred to it as Spain, but without the S.
Yeah. Pain.
Let's work through the soul-crushing loss, the stomach punch loss at the end of a game.
Okay, so it depends on the manner. So if you lose a game on a Hail Mary, it's pretty horrific. But it's also a freak play. Mathematically, it's a freak occurrence. And so at least, hypothetically, I'm not going to say I would, but at least you could tell yourself that, like, if that's how they had to win in, like, a crazy prayer way, you can just say, it's just a bad luck, bad beat. Now, that's a rational part of your brain saying that, right? When you watch it in that moment, you want to throw yourself through a plate glass wall. So I get how horrific that is and how that lingers. The thing that I think should linger even more is when it's a situation that never should have happened, either because of a bad call or because of a series of events that leading up to that never should have happened, or, you know, a penalty. Like, I genuinely, like, as happy as I was in the moment when, if you remember when Oregon beat Oklahoma on the onside kick, I want to say 2006, that didn't look like it went 10 yards and Oregon still had to drive down the field to win that game. Like, when you lose a game that never should have played out in the way it did, that's stuff that lingers to me. Maybe it was, you know, Michael Dyer's arm being down or not being down or whatever. That's the comeuppance that the universe gave to Oregon fans because of the onside kick against Oklahoma all those years later. But when you have the no call, when you have clearly offsides, when you have didn't call the timeout until after the field goal was snapped. The field goal play was snapped. Like just weird occurrences like that it never should have happened. That's the sleepless night right there, or nights or months.
You
or whatever.
You always sort of roll your eyes a little bit when you lose on a Hail Mary. Or when you lose on a freak play. I mean, I would categorize what happened to Miami as kind of a freak situation.
Yeah.
And
except it had happened previously with Mario Cristobal.
In that case, it had
Oregon.
happened previously, and there was certainly a way to mitigate that.
Yeah.
But you always sort of roll your eyes. It's a very unsettling feeling, too, when your team loses in that manner, knowing that your team was good enough to win and should have won, but through some strange quirk of the universe did not.
What helps me during games, maybe it doesn't help you, I don't know, but if I'm rooting for a team, pro, college, whatever, and they're down 10-3, 14-6 or something, but the other team has needed weird, like a scoop and score to score one of those touchdowns, or a trick play to score one of those touchdowns, and isn't just like rolling out a running back getting 7.5 yards a carry. Where if this is what a team needs to get to this point, it's not necessarily a sustainable strategy. So that's a way to sort of stay within yourself a little bit on the couch, that you're like, yes, I know we're down 14-3 early, but it was like a weird tipped pick six and like a short field thing on a fumbled kickoff return that got them there. That's not something that can sustain over 4 quarters for them to win this game. So I don't panic as much knowing that like they can't win like this probably. Sometimes they do. But that helps in those situations that where you're like, West Virginia is not going to lose on a Hail Mary 3 straight weeks. It's just not going to happen mathematically. So that helps. It doesn't really make you feel all the way better, but losing on a Hail Mary, it's gutting, but you're like, it's a freak 1 in a million moment. That's all it is.
Another class of disappointment, of trauma. Let's go to Patreon. Zach and Janie.
Yeah.
Zach writes in to say the 1 a.m. Mel Tucker news drop.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The rest of the season that followed was obviously traumatic. I barely slept a wink that Saturday night. And then Janie writes in to say about the whole Northwestern hazing scandal. The worst, and she says, shameless attempt to slide it all under the rug with an off-season announcement late on a Friday. The way they handled initial communications was very poor. The subsequent firing of Pat Fitzgerald, the sad performance of everyone, but then the interim coach at Big Ten Media Days, and finally the complete lack of accountability by the administration to take any blame for what unfolded.
Yeah.
Kudos to David Braun for a more positive season than I expected. I'm looking forward to sailgating at the lacrosse field next season.
Of course.
So there is this whole other feeling of the rug being pulled out from under you that is completely unrelated to football.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it feels like the administration, the coaching staff, the support system that in most cases is very well paid around the team lets the team down. Now, I hope this one, in both cases, is easier to recover from. Anytime you've got a scandal, it's dicey.
Yeah.
I've been there, Janie. I know what that is like. But moving past, hopefully, the people that were in the wrong and towards a new regime, at least gives you a fresh start. So from a football standpoint, I can't speak to like the machinations of the administration and how they handle situations like yeah. I mean, we're not going to laud the way that anybody handled that. But hopefully from a football standpoint, which is what we cover most on this show, moving forward with the new coach, with new people in charge, should give you a breath of fresh air. Now, I think what Northwestern did by, again, I'm not going to speak to the whole communication misfiring with respect to Pat Fitzgerald, but keeping David Braun on, I thought was a really savvy move.
Mm-hmm.
And I think hiring Jonathan Smith was a savvy move on the Michigan State side of things as well. So I think you look at those two scenarios moving forward into 2024, to the extent that you can put the bad stuff behind you, now having two new coaches that seemingly are pretty capable and kind of know the lay of the land now, given where things have come from there. I'm hopeful that will be a little bit easier to recover from
Yeah.
a fan standpoint.
Yeah, I get the sort of Pat Fitzgerald and the Mel Tucker thing independent of each other because they were very different, although it was, under the broader umbrella of a scandal. The Mel Tucker thing is just like, I mean, they're both kind of out of nowhere. You wake up to the news with Mel Tucker, right? Because it was the middle of the night thing, the suspension, and then obviously the dismissal, and the manner and the reasoning for everything. But it's also, Mel Tucker had provided a good amount of hope early on. The recruiting, the transfer stuff at the same time, like Ohio State continues to rise, Michigan continues to rise, Penn State's solid, and Michigan State got a taste of it. And Mel Tucker was the guy who was going to get them that taste back from the early 20-teens with his recruiting, with his pedigree, both as a brief head coach and a Georgia coordinator, Alabama position coach. That Michigan State was again going to rise up. The Northwestern thing is just like nobody knew in that moment what a Northwestern football program was going to be like without Pat Fitzgerald, because he had been there for so long, modern era Northwestern football program.
He was royalty
right.
at Northwestern.
And so for as many people that criticized his inability to ever figure out offense, and sort of squander all those good, I think it was Mike Hankins was the longtime successful defensive coordinator, squander what were consistently like really, really strong Northwestern defenses, certainly outperforming expectations, it seemed, every year. It didn't seem like there was like a call for Northwestern to fire Pat Fitzgerald because he was wasting one side of the ball so often. He had the old, what was it like, responding to criticism of his offense. What was... You can send me an email or tweet me at like, what was the, please look it up right now. It was like, it was like something at idon'tcare.com. There was a great Pat Fitzgerald, like non-answer. Anyway.
My email address is #IDon'tCare.
Yeah. It mixed like 3 different platforms. It's great. My email address is #IDon'tCare.com. So I get it, because you also then are like scrambling for information, for updates, and who's the interim or who. And if you're a Michigan State fan, you've been looking forward to the season all off season long. And then you're like, oh, I guess we're just going to be bad all year. We're not going to have a head coach. People are going to bail. Like the coaching situation isn't going to be resolved for a long time, in football speak, calendar, whatever. And you're just like, so there's just not much to look forward to and enjoy in this limited amount of time. I get the trauma that you're probably still feeling from that. But, Jonathan Smith, I think the upside there and what he did turning around Oregon State, and Aiden Childs certainly is a bright spot, and his ceiling, like, it's not going to be this year likely, but you'll get to have fun watching the building blocks, hopefully.
Dan, I believe you have a little bit more sentimental music, something a little bit stronger that we could play right now.
Right here. Stronger. I mean, I have a babbling brook. I can add the music in over it.
There's a little bit of Augusta National in that.
It is a little bit.
I don't want to make light of this, but I'm going to be honest with you. These are the scenarios that I think unite us as fans.
Okay.
And many of the ones that we've discussed, I think if you're a rival fan, it'd be easy to sort of... Am I detecting a Japanese flute? What is that?
Something, yeah. It's a woodwind of some kind.
A woodwind of some kind, a reed instrument, if you will.
I'm letting it go, Ty. You better keep it together.
Just bring it down just a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. This is the kind of thing that unites us all, even if you're a fan of a rival team.
Yeah.
The devastating injury.
Oh, yeah.
My earliest recollection of this was the Willis McGahee injury in the national championship game, when it was very clear with the replays that Willis McGahee's knee was not going to be put back together in the same way.
Certainly.
And we've seen this on occasion in high-level sports. It just is the nature of the beast. But Jordan Travis breaking his leg last season, as Stoney writes in, as Mike tweeted a picture of the final playoff field, I understand where they're going with this. The level of disappointment that goes along with losing your star player to a devastating injury that you know is going to have a drastic impact on the remainder of your season, that sucks.
Yeah.
There is nowhere to hide. And I would say it's even harder if your team, like Florida State last year, is having a really good campaign, is on the verge of playing for a national championship, or in our world, playing to get into the playoff. Florida State won the ACC. Florida State left out of the playoff. It was all basically because of the Jordan Travis thing with him breaking his leg. And I think, like I said, it is one of those deals where unless you're a real sicko, unless you're a real sicko and you just don't care about humanity, that type of thing is like really, really the hardest.
Yeah.
The hardest among all of these to try and reconcile. It's impossible to watch.
Well, because it's also you sort of feel the short, medium, and long-term ramifications. And it doesn't all happen at the same time. At first, you're like, oh, no, what's going to happen with this game? Oh, no, what's going to happen with his career? Oh, no, what's going to happen with the ACC championship game?
It hits you in
what's
waves,
going to happen
right?
with the playoff? Oh, no.
It hits you in waves.
Yeah, not all at the same time, but yeah, you start processing multiple things. Yeah, it's tough, man.
Absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal, Dan.
Yeah.
We hope Jordan Travis is
makes
on the
full
road to
recovery, has an NFL career of some kind, makes a bunch of money, because that's tough,
hope so.
man.
I hope so.
And then you're like, if you're a Florida State fan in that moment, then you have to pivot to, well, they can't hold this against us.
Yeah.
Because we still haven't lost. Well, how they're not going to leave us out? Like, there is still something honorable about including us, an undefeated power conference program. And even if it's going to go terribly wrong once we play Michigan or whoever in the playoff, like, we should be honored, of course.
Yeah. It was a double whammy.
And
right?
then you get to experience it further down the road.
One of the most acute sources of trauma in our world is that sense of being left behind or being lapped by a rival.
Of course.
And that, I guess, feeling of being left out obviously applies to a playoff team that gets left out. Now, hopefully won't be as much of a deal now that they've expanded the playoff.
Well, you're not going to be a power conference champion and not in the playoff anymore.
Right, exactly. Hopefully some of that has been resolved now as we've expanded the playoff, but that doesn't do much for Florida State last season.
No.
They still got to deal with that and the frankly traumatic nature by which they were left out of the playoff. That sucks. And
buddy, I watched Dennis Dixon's knee give
Yeah,
out on
Dennis
the turf,
Dixon.
Tucson, Arizona. Like, there is just watching hopes dissolve into the turf.
It's
First
brutal.
from a feeling bad for the player perspective, and then feeling bad for the team, and then, of course, most importantly, feeling bad for yourself and all of the emotional weight you've put into the season.
The thing about catastrophic sports injuries, as fans, you remember where you were when you saw it happen.
Always.
Everybody's got a handful of those moments in their lives. But I remember where I've been when some of these injuries have occurred. I remember
Chad Curtis, Jim Leyritz. Yeah.
I was at my friend's house watching the Willis McGahee thing. Who was the dude from Louisville? The Kevin, I can't think. Kevin Ware, the basketball player.
Who
yes, had the horrible injury of it. Like,
I remember Bo Jackson. I remember when
Solid
Tua
Wife
went
Kate
down.
will not watch basketball with me ever again because of that Kevin Ware injury.
I know players' names who weren't consequential players, but because of their injury, like Ryan Podrell was a fullback for USC in 2008 or something, who had a terrible ankle break in the middle of a game.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. All right, let's go rapid fire through a few of these other ones that we got. We got so many that came in. I want to try and get to as many of these as we can. You remember our good friend Robert from over at IlliniBoard.com?
Oh, yeah, of course.
He calls out he was on our show a couple times, calls out the final 6 Illinois games. Won 27-24 at Maryland on the last second field goal. Lost to Wisconsin on a touchdown pass to an offensive lineman.
That'll happen.
With 27 seconds left. An 85-yard touchdown drive in the final minute to beat Minnesota by 1. An overtime touchdown to beat Indiana. Lost 15-13 at Iowa and 45-43 to Northwestern when a 2-point conversion failed. Oh. That, my friends, is a full life. That is a full life, the final back half of the season, Robert. Thank you for sending that one in.
It can't happen 2 years in a row. Like a string of unfortunate events for anybody, right? That there's just not going to be a stretch like that 2 years in a row. That Maybe Illinois will just lose every game by 14. Hopefully not if you're an Illinois fan. But the universe evens out boring and excitement, and you'll probably have a less eventful year this year. Now, the hope for Illinois fans is, of course, that like offensive line improves, that the defense improves, that, I think it's Terrence Brooks, the Texas corner who's coming over, and Zachary Franklin, the Ole Miss and UTSA receiver. He's reunited with the coordinator. Maybe more Luke Altmaier experience is helpful, that there is a little bit of like that mix of stability and fresh faces for Illinois, that they sort of are what they are. And that means they win tight games and lose to more talented teams. And they return to where they were on defense under Ryan Walters a couple of years ago, and more of the like Bielema ball on offense, beefy, successful football, that they're just not going to have that dramatic stretch. They're not going to be drama queens this year.
All right, some other ones here. Andrew writes in to say Air Force going 0-4 in November. I'm glad somebody called out Air Force, because I recall vividly you and I talking about Air Force basically bottoming out.
And that's quarterback health, too.
Quarterback health. Zach Larrier got hurt.
Right.
And as a result, it kind of threw everything into a bit of a tailspin. But there was this sense of, like many people out at verballers.com, we talk about these games and what's going on across all of college football, not just the power conferences, on a week in, week out basis. And Air Force is a team that people are interested in because they run a cool offense and because they've got this record for being, I think, a pretty reliable team. And when suddenly it felt like it was going off the skids, it was like, what's going on here? What's going on here? So we talked a lot about Air Force, and I share in the frustration, Andrew. I hear what you're saying. Speaking of
which, by the way, I really enjoyed the way Bill Connolly phrased it in his Mountain West preview, in saying we take Air Force for granted too much because they have been so solidly good that, especially in a conference like the Mountain West that has seen turbulence with San Diego State and Boise State and Fresno State, that Air Force, like, you root for a team that is consistently strong, it seems, or at least in the last few years. You take away the 2020 COVID year, that like there's a bedrock element to Air Force football, which hopefully you can lean on.
Drew writes in to say Mississippi State 7, Arkansas 3, and I'm a Mississippi State fan.
Yeah, well, hey, Jeff Lebby, on the plus side, offense should be better.
A very ugly win is definitely its own class of trauma. Maybe not as traumatic as some of the ones we described here.
Well, also, you can always lose ugly. If you're winning ugly, it's always on the table that you lose ugly too. Yeah.
Also, a shout out to Drew here, who has my jam when it comes to fast food menu item. I'm a Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich guy. You know this about me. And I like the version of it now with the pepper jack cheese and the tomatoes and the lettuce on it. He goes no pickle, I go pickle.
Oh, I love a pickle.
But I also go fries just like him. I don't go with a T, but that is my go-to order, the spicy chicken sandwich. What is yours?
At Chick-fil-A? No,
just in general.
My go-to fast food?
Your go-to fast food order, yeah.
If I'm getting fast food, I'm just in the mood for something greasy and fast here.
Yeah.
It probably is Chick-fil-A. It's pretty close by, and I'll probably just go a spicy chicken sandwich, extra pickle, fry, honey mustard, and barbecue sauce. I think Chick-fil-A sauce is fine. I don't dislike it, but it's not my go-to. And I will pick off a few nuggets that my kids don't eat in addition. I think the Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich is kind of a perfect food.
We've got a tweet here from Mel Brooks needs the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Hey, why not? Bama's centers, now Ohio State center, by the way.
Yeah, McLaughlin.
His inability to shotgun a football against Maryland.
Oh, been there.
Or Michigan, excuse me. Bit of a different scenario. Yeah. The inexplicable mistake is one of those deals. And obviously a bad snap, especially after there had been many other bad snaps, is very frustrating.
Yeah.
I would group in with this the weird scenarios that punt returners, kick returners, gunners find themselves in, where it's very easy to muff a punt, to commit kick catch interference.
It's sort of the routine fundamental error, right? Where you're like, this is the basic thing that we should be doing correct, right? That like you're dropping an open pass in which you're not even running, right? You run a hitch route 3 yards past the first down sticks and you just drop it. It just goes through your butterfingers. And, please let me be the first to say I would 100%. If I were a college football player, if I were an NFL player, I would be making the routine fundamental errors. But it's the bad hold. It's the bad snap. It's the have a quarterback wrapped up, but you can't bring him down, slips out of your grasp. Like the routine fundamental, like 9 out of 10 times, 95 out of 100 times, non-issue. And in a crucial moment or a crucial game becomes an issue.
Yeah, and it's not exactly the same, but we got one here from Tiger Chant, who said that it hurt really badly, and he included a video way back in like week 3, I want to say, the early part of the season last year when Clemson lost to Florida State.
Yeah.
And he included the video of Cade Klubnik getting sacked. He fumbles, Florida State scoops and scores, and they end up going up 2 touchdowns. It was like 31.
No. It was Clemson could have gone up 2 touchdowns because Florida State didn't lead until winning the game.
Excuse me. That's
so
right.
They were driving up a touchdown. Could have gone up 2. Florida State has the scoop and score to tie the game. Yeah.
It's right in front of me. I'm misreading it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Tiger Chant. My apologies. Yeah, you're right. The scoop and score kind of out of nowhere when it feels like momentum is going in your direction. Nice little whipsaw there, right? Nice like being thrown into a tub of cold water.
It's a 14-point swing. Yeah.
Big swing.
And you know what else it is? This is what I say out loud to nobody in particular when this happens to my team or any team. You can rationalize, look, my team's getting pushed around or that this team is getting pushed around and it's clear that like they're just not going to be able to sustain for 4 quarters and they lose a game by, they lose a game 37-20. And like, yep, that's probably what should have happened given the rhythms of that game. But when it's a scoop and score, when it's a tipped pass that should have been intercepted, but then the receiver catches it and runs it in. It's like Ricardo Lewis for Auburn all those years ago.
Yeah.
It's to nobody in particular. I just lean back on my couch and I say, not like this, guys. It's okay to lose if you just, we're not as good. But don't lose like this. Not like this. That's what I feel.
Speaking of going from highs to lows.
Yeah.
Bennett writes in with a really good one. I don't mean to laugh, but this one is so true. Talk about being on top of the world, having college game day come to your campus. I'm talking about James Madison.
Yeah.
Do you remember the hype around JMU getting game day? In advance of that App State game, App State had ups and downs. App State, I don't mean any ill will towards App State. App State, I don't think
JMU was in a better place last year. Yeah.
Yeah, JMU is in a better place. App State is not as bulletproof as they've been, I think, in our time of doing this podcast, right? They've had plenty of changes. People have come and gone. Still a very good program.
Yeah.
But JMU was in a better place last year. Hosted game day. App State comes to town. App State beats them in overtime. Talk about an absolute all-time stomach punch in the middle of a great season. And then on top of it, you lose the coach. There are a bunch of outgoing transfers.
Mm-hmm.
JMU is now at this FBS level because they've had a lot of success at the FCS ranks. And my hunch is that they will be just fine. They kind of know what they're doing there. But the tandem of things that went down at JMU with losing that game with game day in town and then with losing your coach and a bunch of players, that's just a dagger. An absolute dagger, man.
Awful. Yeah.
Absolute dagger. Daniel, we have so many more of these. We can save some of them for a bonus episode, which will drop out on Patreon on Thursday.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for writing in. Again, far too many of these for us to get through in one episode. I mean, it would take forever to go through all of these. And we've got all sorts of good ones that I want to discuss with you.
And all of them valid, by the way.
Very valid. Like, of course, you're going to have some, like we had some Michigan people write in. They gloated a little bit.
That they felt no trauma.
Felt no trauma, right?
It probably was, on a certain level, dealing with the off-field stuff and losing Jim Harbaugh. And I understand that you probably have some moments, some dips, but it's a good year.
It was a good year. We had some other ones writing in about, like, what if the transfer goes south? The whole Jeff Sims experience. Slater writes it with Jeff Sims.
Yeah, man.
Understand the trauma there, Slater, completely. So many really, really valid ones. We appreciate people opening up, Dan, give me some music if you could.
Oh, of course.
Being vulnerable, being willing to work through the tough times, getting ready to build towards the 2024 season. Our hope springs eternal.
Thank you for sharing your innermost feelings, and it's meaningful to us that you were able to open up and we were able to work through it. Again, everything you said valid. Everything you said was true in our eyes as being traumatizing, and so may these heaps of emotional disasters be thrown upon all of your enemies in 2024 and flip it around for you as you coast into the sunny horizon.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Dan. That was beautiful. For that guy there, my good friend, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrand, thanks for tuning in here, for working through all this stuff with us. Tune in next week for more college football content as ever. In the meantime, verballers.com is where you can go for our Patreon, ad-free episodes, bonus content, join the Discord community, talk through some of these points, and much, much more. You know the deal.
Yeah.
Stay solid.
Peace.